Going adventuring on a sailboat is the dream for most of us, and that dream comes with a couple of challenges, not the least of which is how to get around a new town when you anchor the boat. You take the dinghy to shore and then what? Uber? That's expensive. Walk? Sure, but how far? A couple miles? How about with 60 pounds of groceries? What's a sailor to do? Most sailors solve this problem with some sort of bicycle. And of course, we'd like that bicycle to be of the folding variety because space on our boats is really limited and precious. And if you want to skip the research and just buy the folding bicycle that cruisers have been buying for decades, you just buy a Dahon. These folks have been doing folding bikes since 1982 and they've become commonplace on sailboats because they fold, they're reliable and they're easy. Just what we like for our practical solution and mobility problem. If you can walk a mile or two for groceries, a folding bike like this will extend your range, but also extend your carry capacity. I used a pair of these with some mountaineering style backpacks to make provisioning much easier for me. If you want a folding bike, we've reviewed and always recommend the Dahon D8, the Mariner. It's about $1,000 and it's really the gold standard in this arena. And if you buy the optional bag it goes in, it'll be easy to store on the boat. I kept two of these things in my portside lazarette without very much issue. The D8 is 27 pounds. It folds up to 26 inches by 13 by 32. It's got 20-inch tires, which are great for adults and much more stable than the 16-inch tires you might find elsewhere. And it comes with 8 gears to get you around any coastal city that you might find yourself in. If the D8 is our standard, then why make this video at all? Well, because pedal bikes may get the job done, but we now live in a world where we can do even better. We can electrify these bikes to get even more range, even more carry capacity for the groceries, and work a lot less hard to move about. Today, we have folding e-bikes. I don't have one of these on my boat, but a dock neighbor I met in Utch's Marina in Cape May did have one, and he let me use it to run to the store, and let me tell you, it was a blast. It was keeping up with traffic no problem and scooting along with my big mountaineering backpack on filled with supplies. What a game changer for the cruising sailor. I was reading a Practical Sailor article this morning where Drew compared some different e-bikes. I'll leave a link to the full article below. Drew is an avid cyclist and a sailor, so he knows a thing or two about these sorts of things, and I was keen to learn from him. Drew pointed me out a few e-bikes to look at in his article, and of course, we'd have to see Dahon on this list because they make one themselves. This is the K-One they make, and it's a lot like the D8 that we all love, except it's electric. But in researching this bike, I decided it's actually not the one for me. Where the D8 is 27 pounds, this is 42. Not a huge deal, I can handle 42 pounds, but it's a bit much. The battery in this bike is in the seat post, which is actually pretty cool because you can usually take it inside to charge it or keep it out of the cold. I like that. It folds up to 33 by 15 by 26, so it's almost the same as its manual pedaled sister bike, which is nice. But Drew points out that the bottom end of power on these e-bikes is usually about 250 watts, which is what this one is. It's the bottom end. And this bike doesn't have a throttle. That may seem weird, but it uses a sensor to decide when to turn the electricity on. And there are two types of these sensors a bike could have, a cadence sensor and a torque sensor. A cadence sensor senses when you pedal, and it applies power to help. It doesn't matter how hard you pedal, it just sees the pedals turning and that's good enough. A torque sensor bike senses how hard you pedal and matches your effort. For me, the torque sensor means I always have to be outputting effort to get the electricity to help me, and that kind of turns me off a little bit. Call me lazy, but sometimes I'd like to be able to just tell the bike to go and have it go without me having to try very hard. So a torque sensor system is not going to be my cup of tea. So the Dahon is a great option because we know it'll be well made and long lasting and it folds well and it isn't too heavy, but it's not for me. So what is? Well, there's another kid on the block, and we've been seeing it at the boat shows a lot in the last couple years. It's not the born in '82 Dahon. It's much younger, hipper, more trendy, which is not always good, but let's take a look for comparison's sake. This is the Jackrabbit, and off the cuff, I like it. To the K-One's 250 watts, this one is 300. To the K-One's pedal torque activated assist, this is all electric, no pedals to speak of. And it's small. People may accuse you of stealing your kids' or grandkids' bicycle, but it's hot, it's trendy. Where people have become accustomed to Dahon's traditional look, this is new and it mimics a BMX, which I also like. But for practical purposes, is it any good, especially compared to the K-One? Well, instead of being 42 pounds, it's just 24. You can cart it around with one hand, upstairs, climb rocks. In fact, that was the goal overall when they built the Jackrabbit, make it the smallest and easiest bike that would be the most efficient way to move a human being around without taking up too much space when it's not in use. You can even bring it on an airplane. It's FAA compliant. Where the traditional bikes fold up sideways, the Jackrabbit folds flat, intended to fit under the bed or the couch. It folds to 45 inches by 7 inches by 30 inches, so twice the length of a traditional but half the width. So it'll take up the same square inches but be a long skinny shape instead of a thick rectangle. That would actually be better to keep it along the lifelines if that's your intention. But I could still get two of them in my lazarette. Where the K-One says it'll do 20 miles per hour at up to 50 miles on its 8.7 amp hour battery, the Jackrabbit's same claimed 20 miles an hour will only get you about 10 miles on its 4.2 amp hour battery, but they do sell extra batteries to double or triple your range if you want to. Remember though, the K-One's range, that 50 claimed miles, comes from the fact that you'll need to be pedaling and applying torque to get you to go anywhere, so you'll be doing half the work. The Jackrabbit doesn't even have pedals, and it's half the weight to be loading and unloading from the dinghy and moving around. Where the K-One is like carting around a work boot, the Jackrabbit is more of a tennis shoe. On price, the K-One's $2,000. The Jackrabbit isn't just half the weight. It's half the price, coming in at about $1,000. And extra batteries. Jackrabbit's battery is only about $200, so you could feasibly buy 5 of them for $1,000 and get the same range and the same price as the K-One, but never have to pedal at all. Jackrabbit makes some other cool stuff too, a back rack, a seat with a spring, some fenders, and a carry bag. I couldn't find extra batteries from Dahon. Charging on both bikes is basically the same, 110 volts, so you'll need to be running them off the inverter. And from my own personal experience, keep them out of the salt. A chain and derailleur and anything else made of exposed metal will rust almost immediately if it gets a splash of salt water. And maybe that's another win for the Jackrabbit. It doesn't have a chain or a derailleur and many less moving parts than a traditional folding bike. But that brings me back to the Jackrabbit's biggest fault for us sailors. When it dies, it's dead. You can't just pedal it home on a dead battery. It only weighs 24 pounds though, so you could easily carry it or walk it along beside you when it's dead. But when it's dead, it's dead. You really have to plan your trips and make sure you don't run out of juice. But in my experience, grocery trips from the dock are actually usually very short, a couple miles here and there, so one battery would likely do me just fine. The longest trip I've ever had to make was from City Dock in Annapolis to Bacon Sales, which is 2.2 miles away, so less than 5 miles round trip, which the Jackrabbit would happily do. This might sound like a commercial for the Jackrabbit, but it's not. I like the Dahon for what it is, the pedal version or the electric assisted. It's time honored and battle tested, and I've owned a slew of them. They're great bikes and excellent sailboat bikes. But maybe, just maybe, they could be a bit of fun too, and the Jackrabbit delivers that. Fun. Lightweight, maneuverable, fun. And sailors, we like fun. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment. What would you like us to review? What would you like to see an episode on? If we can get a K-One and a Jackrabbit, would you like to see me and the boss have a race from City Dock to Bacon Sales? Let's hear it.